Welcome back to our series, 2D Art to 3D Animation Snowy Intro. Now that we have our snowflakes and a basic understanding of all the components used, let's build a scene from scratch and make a video. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, George from Bitulip here. This video is the fourth in our series, 2D Art to 3D Animation Snowy Intro. Today we're going to leverage all that we've learned so far and build a scene and render it to video. Let's get started. Go ahead and start Blender and we'll go to File, New, General. We won't save our changes. First thing we'll do is highlight the cube, delete the cube. Let's go to our camera and let's Alt-G to remove any location, Alt-R to remove rotation. We're going to rotate it around the X, 90 degrees. We're going to grab it in the Y and slide it back someplace like that. We're going to grab the light, the default light, do the same thing, Alt-G, Alt-R. Let's grab it in the Z and move it up out of the way. While we have it, let's name it top so we can find it. And also while we're at it, let's go ahead and rename this to environment. Okay, on the lamp, let's go ahead and just set this to 1200 and we should be good there. Let's make it a spot and not a point. And now let's just set some of the other settings. So in the render, we want to use cycles, and the output, we just want to enable render region, and we want to go to 1000. Doing 1 and 1000. Next, we're going to go to scene. In scene, we want to make sure gravity is enabled, but we'll want this to be -7. And then we'll go to world, and in the world, we want to change the color. And I have the hex, and we'll just put that in. So now we kind of have our environment set up. And we can continue next with importing the snowflakes. So we're going to import, but let's go back to here to make it a little easier, and let's also disable the lights so that way it's a little less cluttered. File, import, SVG, find your files. And import. There it is, small. We'll go ahead and grab it, set its origin to be the center of its geometry, and snap it to the cursor. We're going to rotate X 90. We are going to, while we have it, let's go ahead and rename it Snowflake 1, and then rename this collection Snowflakes. With it highlighted, we'll go to Object Data, Geometry, Extrude it 0.002, and give it a bevel of 0.002. And if we zoom in, you can see that it's done that. We're going to go to Material. And the first thing we're going to do is name this material Snowflake, because we'll use it for the others as they come in. And we're going to do a simple coloring to that, which is a color, the base color is perfect, so we're going to give it a metallic of 0.055, a specular of 0.664 and a roughness of 0.205. And so if we go back here and zoom in, enable these, you see is that it catches color and some reflection on just the tips, and that's the look we're going for. So what I would do now is grab it in the X and kind of slide it out of the way so it's not in our way as we position other things. So what I'll do now is do the same thing for 2 more snowflakes, and then we'll do that quick and then we'll catch up. Okay, so what I've done is imported the other 2, moved them to the same snowflakes collection, set their bevel and their extrude and their color to match, and then scaled them all to be relatively the same size. So the next step will be to work on the text. Now would be a good time to do File Save and save it someplace on your hard drive. And then to make it easier, we're going to go ahead and disable those and then add text. There it is. First thing we're going to do is give it, extrude it, and give it a bevel. We're going to choose a font. There we go. We're going to align it to the center. And then we're going to rotate around the X 90 to stand it up. Then we're going to go in edit mode and go ahead and change this to the text we want. Back to object mode. And now if we go into camera view, we can see that it doesn't fit. So what we're going to do is enable this just so we can grab the camera. And what we're going to do is grab it in the Y and then just slide it back slightly to get it to where the text fits. That looks about right. So what we're going to do is cheat a little bit and import or append a texture that, or a material we already had. So we're just going to file append and choose ice and append that. And now for this we can go ahead and for material we can choose ice. So now that's assigned here. Now what we want to do is make a duplicate of this. So we're going to do Shift D, grab it in the Y, oops, sorry, grab it in the Z, and slide that down. And then go in edit mode. And let's change this text. Alright, now what we want to do is go back here, select this, we want to scale it. Again, making it slightly smaller, and then we'll grab it in the Z and kind of line it up where we want. And then let's go ahead and clean up our outliner. So this is the first one, so let's call that text. Call that text line 1. And we'll call this one text line 2. Let's go ahead and grab them both and do an M to make a new collection. We'll call it text. And now they're both in text, so that way it's easy for us to turn them on and off. Okay, so let's add the planes that will host the emitter particle systems that will emit the snowflakes. So we'll scroll down here a little bit. We want the first one to be between the camera and the text. So add mesh plane, grab it in the Y, move it out here. Let's scale it in the X to make it enough that the snowflakes are all the way off the edge when we look through the camera. And then let's grab it in the Z, move it up, and then if we look through the camera, we want to make sure that it's up just enough out of this scene. Then for this, let's go ahead and rename this. We'll just call it plain front emitter. And you go here, and then we'll add a particle system. We want 1500 snowflakes, and we want it to be between 1 and 1000, which is the end, and we want them to live the entire time. We'll go to velocity. We want this very, very small. We want tangent to be small, and we want to phase it we want rotation on. We want them to rotate. We want them to rotate around their normal. And we want to randomize this. And we want them to be dynamic. Alright, now comes physics. Physics, we want Newtonian. We want them to weigh very little, so that way they are affected by the momentum and the velocity more than by gravity. So we want them to weigh a little bit less. We're going to use Brownian to stir them up a little bit. 0.04, 0.052, and 0.01. And then we'll continue down under render. Right now they're rendering as halos, so if you were to move it, there'd be little pops, little circles. And what we want is to use a collection, and we want to use our collection of snowflakes, and we want to pick them random out of that. And now if you run it, you'll see that they're there, but they're very small. So we want to change this scaling to be 0.2. And now, if we let them go, you see the snowflakes. And we might adjust these sizes depending upon the look we want to get to. So that is, one last thing is under field weights. We want the gravity to be very small. 0.6, so that way, again, as they fall, they flutter a little bit more because gravity's not pulling them straight down. So let's go ahead and create the back emitter. So what we'll do is grab the front one, do Shift D to duplicate it, grab it in the Y, and let's go ahead and slide it back. Let's look above it here. Let's adjust the geometry a little, so we're going to make it a little bit wider. So we're going to scale it in X, and let's scale it in Y just a little bit. And by doing that, we'll change the pattern of the snowflakes falling, so they won't fall exactly the same. Now we know it's going to have to go up a little bit because it's just the angle of the camera, but the easiest thing is to, with the highlighter, go back into camera, and you could see it. It would be visible. So let's just grab it in the Z and push it until it's out of the way. Now all the values should be the same for this one because it's using the same particle system, and that's okay. But let's go ahead and rename it. So we'll go in here and we'll just call it plain back emitter. And so it's easier. And let's go ahead and highlight these two do M to make a new collection, and let's call them emitters. And now they're underneath the emitter, so again it's easy to turn them both on and off at the same time. So we go back to our camera view and we play this a little. We should have snowflakes in the front and snowflakes in the back. Okay, so next come the lights. We're going to have 4 in total. I already have one, but what I'm going to do is for this one, I'm going to add an object constraint, and I'm going to track to, and I want to track it to the first line of text, so that way anytime I move it, it'll always be directing its light on the text. So what I'm going to do is Shift D to create another one, and I'm going to grab it and I'm going to move it over here, and again the track to is already assigned, so it automatically is always pointing in that direction. I'm going to change the bulb to be an area bulb, and then I'll go ahead and adjust the colors and the lights and the exact positioning I want. I'll tweak around with that to get the results I want, and we'll get back together and talk about the results. So I got the lights set up the way I want. I have a left front and a right front, the top spotlight and a backlight. The backlight's main purpose is just to throw a little bit of light against the back faces of the lettering, and because they're translucent, it kind of adds a reflection on the back surfaces, the back faces, so they get picked up by the camera. Set to a relatively small power and pretty far away. The front left is a white light at 500, and the one on the right is a 500 but with a more warmer color, and the intent there is that as the snowflakes fall, the ones that are facing to the left will pick up the white, and the ones facing to the right will pick up a different color. So you get a little bit more variation of the colors in between. Okay, the last thing we have to do before we can start rendering is fade in this text. So what we'll do is highlight the text, go to shading. This is the node set up for ice for this material that I appended. And so I'm not going to go into all these settings. I got this from somebody a few years ago, and I will try to find who I got it from and add a link to their post in the description. But in the meantime, if someone else knows who this might have come from, please leave a comment and we'll be sure to give them credit in our description. So the key here is this, is the animation of this, which is occurring here. When we brought it in, it brought it here, and I know that my final rendering really is going to start from 200 to 1000. And so what I want to do is highlight these and move these down a little bit so they're not starting too early. And then one thing to notice is that they both lines are using the same material, which means is that they'll animate the same way, and I want the bottom one to come in a little later. And so if I look at this, I know it's using ice. If I tap here, it creates a copy of that material. And now what I can do is down here is I can highlight these, grab them and slide them over here. That's about here. And now it'll fade in after the first line. And then one other thing I know is that I want the number to be less than, closer to 1, so that way it's more transparent than filled, and through testing we came up with that should be 8. So one of the things to remember is when you do this is click up here and replace the keyframe. So now it fades down to 0.8 and then it stays 0.8 over time. If you take a look at that, we'll see how that looks. Is Snowy fades in, then bit by Bitulin fades in, and it doesn't fade as much, and so you're left with kind of the look we're going for. So finally, we're at the point where we can start to render this out to a video. We'll be doing that in two parts. The first part is to render a PNG for every frame, and then the second part is merging those all together into a single MOV file. So there are some settings we want to set just before we start. That is under render settings. We want to make sure motion blur is turned on. Under output, we want to make sure that we've selected the path to put all the PNGs, so it will be easy for us to find those in the second part. And then the final thing is for the camera is set depth of field on and choose the first line of text. And what this will do is make anything behind it a little bit more blurry, anything closer to the camera blurry, and it'll just draw the watcher's eyes to the text. So with those set, obviously one thing you want to do is save it, so that way we can always come back to this if there's a problem rendering. And then the final thing will be to render animation, and we'll get back together once this process is done. Alright, we let it run. It took a couple hours, but you can see I have my 1000 PNGs. So what we want to do now is render it actually out to a video or an MOV file. So what we're going to do here is, if you don't have it, we're going to do add video editing. There we go. What we're going to do is add an image or sequence, and we'll go ahead and find our renders. And now I know I don't want the first 200, and that's because the snowflakes won't be generated. So what I'm going to do is, just instead of selecting all of them, I'm going to select from let's say 200 all the way to 1000. Click here, click those, add a strip, and then there it goes and adds a strip. Now I can see that I don't want to really go all the way to the end, so I don't want to go to 1000, so I can change over here under output. I'll change to 800, and now it'll just put out this section. And if I run over time, you can see in the preview as I progress the Snowy and the Bitulin coming in. So that's perfect. So now in our output, instead of it being here, what I want to do is choose a different place to put them out, and I'll just put them out in here, and I'll accept that. And instead of PNG, I want video, and then in encoding, I want the container to be QuickTime to produce an MOV. And then the last thing I want to do is make this high quality. And one final thing is, I want it to be 30 frames a second, just to give it a little crisper look. So what I go ahead and do here is save my settings. So I go to Save As, save it, and then click the Render Animation button. So we'll come back after it produces the MOV file. Alright, it finally rendered, and now I have my MOV file. I'll go ahead and double click it, and there it is. It's snowing, and it's a snowy intro by Bitulin. Hey, thank you so much for watching this series. If you missed any of the previous videos, just look in the description below for their links. If you found this video helpful, please click on the like button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Take care, and talk to you soon.